Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar on emotional regulation. My name is Kajani Belaidam. This webinar will provide information on emotional regulation, what you should and shouldn't do, and some emotional regulation strategies that can probably help you. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, you can contact us at info.kujengafamily.org. So before I continue, I'd like to start off with the land acknowledgement. Kujenga Wellness Project acknowledges the lands and people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. The lands we are situated on are covered under the Williams Treaties and the traditional territory of the Mississauga, a branch of the Great Anishinaabe Nation, including Algonquin, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. So what is emotional regulation? It is the ability to control or influence which emotions you have, when you have them, and how you experience or express them. Emotional regulation can be automatic or controlled, conscious or unconscious. The purpose of emotional regulation is not to block or avoid the uncomfortable emotions. Emotional regulation helps with reducing the intensity and strength of the emotions by modifying our thoughts and behaviors. Emotions themselves are not good or bad, positive or negative. It's a natural human response to life stressors. It is the brain's way of responding with information at a specific time. Our emotions are telling us something, like our intuition. So for example, you see a spider or an insect in your bathroom. You have an automatic sense of fear and threat, and you want to either get rid of it or run away from it. This is your body's way of telling you that you need to survive. This is a survival response. We also should keep in mind that emotions are temporary. There is nothing wrong with how you're feeling in the moment. Our emotions come and go even if we're not doing anything. So what is then emotional dysregulation? This is when someone who is emotionally vulnerable may be more sensitive and reactive than others. So for example, for some Black folks, Indigenous or racialized people, emotional vulnerability can be experienced through racism in the form of microaggression. It takes a longer time to return to baseline, especially when you feel angry, sad, upset, or frustrated, and you're unable to regulate your emotions in a healthy way, and you're upset about that one situation throughout the whole day, replaying the event over and over again. This results in your negative experiences, behaving sometimes in impulsive ways. The environments of emotional reactive people are invalidating. So for example, there are several uncomfortable and sudden life experiences and stressors that places you in a constant emotional roller coaster. Either you've lost your job, there's the pandemic, physical distancing, not being able to see your loved ones, thinking about how to pay for your bills, your mortgage. All of these things are very uncomfortable and sudden life experiences that we've had to deal with this year. You're probably constantly feeling like you're always at a 6 on a scale of 10, but somehow you hang in there and you try to do something else and maybe try not to mess it up or hope that it goes out or turns out well. What can then happen is that a tiny incident, or perhaps someone asks you for something or asks you a question. It may not be a big deal normally, but the individual who is at the height of their emotions or at the brink of their heightened emotions may react, which may seem like they're overreacting. Or another example is, in the case of racial microaggressions, racialized communities constantly face social inequities, systemic oppression, and racism. They're always hearing things that undermine their abilities and intelligence, or they see things on TV that trigger their emotions. So if someone makes a comment that is discriminating and racist, it is likely that the individual react and become emotional. At this time, the person who made the comment becomes defensive and tells them that they were just joking, and asks them to chill down, or I was just joking, no need to get angry. When someone is ridiculed or shamed for reacting to an abnormal situation, they make the person feel guilty, shame, misunderstood, isolated, and rejected. This can result in prolonged periods of dysregulation that can cause disruption in relationships and result in someone acting in an emotionally exaggerated way to a minor problem. So, what are some things that you shouldn't do with your emotions? First of all, you shouldn't try to problem solve your emotions. Try to think logically or rationally to solve them. When we try to problem solve our emotions away, we're not really solving anything. What happens instead is that it gets intensified and it remains brewing in the background, impacting your daily functioning, your relationships with others, and how you perceive the world. The next thing you shouldn't do is try to control your emotions. Telling yourself, stop feeling this way, get over it. This happens when we aren't able to solve our emotions. We can't change how we feel by forcing it away. So imagine when someone tells you to feel a certain way or the opposite of how you're feeling. So, for example, you had a really bad day at work, you or you didn't submit in your assignment, and you feel pretty bummed out about it, and you feel really sad. And you have somebody telling you, it can be a friend, it can be a partner, though it is well intended, they're telling you to cheer up. Don't think about it, don't sweat it. How does that make you feel? Does that work? The next is blocking or avoiding our emotions. Maybe we can avoid our emotions for a little bit. Every time we suppress or avoid our emotions or send them away, they come back louder, demanding our emotions or attention. When we can't face our feelings because of how it makes us feel and how uncomfortable it is to face it, we tend to avoid situations, people, and places. Lastly, avoiding situations. This limits how we live our lives. We're isolating ourselves and limiting our interactions with others, our engagement in activities that can increase or elevate our mood and connections. Emotional avoidance can lead to anxiety or depression. So, what are some of the long-term effects of suppressing our emotions? Well, it can cause physical stress on our body, feeling headaches, muscle pains, joint pains. It can either increase or decrease our blood pressure, issues of memories, low self-esteem, increased risk of diabetes and heart disease, aggression, physical or verbal, anxiety and depression, headaches, intestinal problems like stomach aches, insomnia, or sleep deprivation or not having enough sleep, or autoimmune disorders. So these are some situations. This is an example of what can happen. So the situation is you're criticized at work. So what is the trigger to your problem? And so what happens when that happens? You get criticized at work, your thoughts, I'm not good enough. So what's going through your mind? How are you feeling? How do you feel when about that thought? I feel worthless, or I feel kind of anxious. What happens to your behavior? What are you doing in that situation? I'm either isolating myself, avoiding contact with others. And what's happening in your body? What is that physical reaction? I feel tired. I don't feel hungry. I don't feel sleepy. Those are some of the things that happen. So, really identifying what happens when there's a situation. So, what can I do to regulate my emotions? First off, it's important to identify your emotions and to not let it consume you. Our emotions are temporary. When you're feeling any sort of emotions, sadness, anger, joy, disappointment, Identify what prompted this emotion. What happened prior to the event that stressed you out? How do you interpret the event in the moment, not in the past? So, for example, right now, I feel angry because I feel that I was attacked. Checking our facts. Is this based on my emotions or is there a factual reasoning behind this? What are your thoughts about this emotion? What are some coping strategies that have worked in the past to cope with your emotions? Understand what the emotion is. Acknowledge that you have these emotions and understand what they are doing to you physically. Notice the physical sensations in your body when you're experiencing these emotions. So, for example, I feel angry, my heart rate is racing, my palms are sweaty, my breath is more shallow, or I'm having trouble breathing. What are your urges? What do you want to do when you feel angry? Going for a smoke, having a drink, isolating yourself. Expressing expressive behaviors associated with our emotions, such as crying or yelling or throwing things. What are the effects or the aftermath of your emotion on other types of functions? For example, after this event, how are you feeling? How does this affect your work, your day, your relationships, your mood, and sense of being? Next, you should accept your emotions for what it is, sitting in the discomfort. And it's not always easy to sit in our discomfort. This is the first step to begin regulating your emotion. Accepting that you have emotions. When you accept your emotions, it begins to lose strength and intensity, and even if it feels uncomfortable. You should validate your emotions. Judging our emotions is similar to avoiding it. Why can't I get over this? What's wrong with me? Give yourself permission to have this emotion. Acknowledge the presence of your emotions. Reduce vulnerability by building mastery. This is to engage and develop activities that can build your confidence, that can build your self efficacy, that can build your control and competence. Another way of reducing your vulnerability is by mental rehearsal. So, what that looks like is visualizing your day and how that will play out or how you would like for it to play out. This will help with handling negativity, disappointment, and prepare you with how you can respond. For example, you want to ask for a pay raise. Plan out, think about how that looks like, visualize how that looks like. What are some things that you can respond? What are some things that you can say? And decrease emotional suffering. So, practicing mindfulness, the here and the now, observing and describing your current emotions in a non judgment manner, acknowledging and understanding our primary emotions, which are sadness, happiness, disappointment, um, joy. These emotions are adaptive and appropriate. Most of our emotional distress is a result of secondary response to our primary emotions. So, what are these secondary responses? There are shaming over having our emotions, anxiety about your emotions being wrong or inappropriate, anger, disappointment, or rage because you feel judged for having that emotion, or overreacting what might be a normal situation for others. And finally, it's very important to practice self compassion. So, what are some of the maladaptive emotional regulation strategies? So, these strategies are pretty much trying to avoid or block the uncomfortable emotions that we feel. And we do that by either abusing alcohol or other substance, engaging in self harm or self injury, avoiding or withdrawing from different situation, being physical or verbally aggressive, and excessive social media use to the exclusion of other responsibilities. So, what are some healthy ways of regulating our emotions, and what are some of the strategies? Talking with our friends or family about how we feel and communicating that in a healthy manner. Again, practicing self compassion, exercising doesn't have to be intense, it can be a walk around the neighborhood, a couple of squats or lunges or skipping rope, writing in a journal, writing how you feel. Um, you can reflect on it after about how you feel. Yoga and meditation, therapy, peer support group to feel belonged and sort of understand that, everyone goes through this too. Getting enough sleep, noticing uncomfortable thoughts before or after strong emotions, and noticing when you need a timeout or when you need a break. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for joining me and giving me the opportunity to share with you today.